Hi, and welcome back to Yeti at Large. The primaries are behind us and the midterms are quickly approaching, so maybe it's time to stop playing games and do a little bit of a history lesson. I would tell you that every election is hotly contested, as liberty is only one generation away from extinction. And history may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. So I thought it would be good to go back exactly 100 years and look at the state of American political parties and see how it compares to the rhetoric and labels that we hear of today. This is a textbook that was common in high schools in 1922, The Form and Function of American Government. It was written by Professor Thomas Harrison Reed, which ironically was a professor of municipal government at the University of California. It has a very nationalistic vibe to it, and it might seem strange today, but that would have been pretty common in 1922. There was a lot of things in this book we could look at, but we went right back to the parties and sub-parties that were prevalent in the American political landscape at the time. I thought it was interesting that they took note of the Federalist and Republican parties. Those are the origins of John Adams. And the Democratic and National Republican parties. It also talks about the Whig Party, which, interestingly enough, was formed by a coalition of National Republicans and a portion of Southern Democrats. This was far before the Civil War. The Republican Party, interestingly enough, is cited as having the roots for the origins of the Progressive Party. The Progressives really formed an identity under Theodore Roosevelt. I think it's interesting and still relevant today because the Fabian socialists originated out of England. They believed in the nudge theory, that you could gently coerce policy and not foment revolution at the point of a barrel. At that time, many of the National Socialists and Communists were advocating violent overthrow. Woodrow Wilson was a prevalent Democrat listed in this book with his progressive platform. And the Socialist Party is noted in here. I think it's very interesting that the origins of socialists who seek to bring about revolution by violence are, of course, not treated as political allies. Interestingly enough, the Socialist Party made as its strongest demand was freedom of speech. Socialists had been persecuted for their isolationist views leading up to the Great War. Wasn't referred to as World War I at this point because there had been no World War II. It was simply the Great War. He does note that conservatives aren't near as conservative as they used to be, which I think he's wrong if he would have seen 2022 and this latest generation of conservatives who are principle-driven political candidates. If we jump ahead many chapters into taxation, it's very interesting that he's careful to present many different sides, but he does talk, the Owens Valley Aqueduct. That was Mulholland that stole all the water out of the Owens Valley because of a non-survivable drought. Sounds familiar today, doesn't it? If we go into taxation, one of the most interesting things they talk about is land poor. We also hear the same term, house poor. There's an argument made in this textbook that property tax is illegal because just because somebody owns a piece of property, they may not be in a position to actually pay the tax. It sounds very similar to today's sentiment. Interestingly enough, in 1922, we had a prototype vaccine, as it was called at the time, called insulin. There was a lot of controversy over that, whether it was suitable for humans. There was also a massive scandal about federal oil that was sold without competitive bids. These are other textbooks by Thomas and Harrison Reed. on loyal citizenship, where he talks about his, not theirs, not hers, his future duties. Train the students for proper citizenship. Language you probably wouldn't hear out of a California university today. I do like the fact, though, that he mentions your rights and your responsibilities in the form of privileges. And under the American spirit, a basis for world democracy sure reeks of imperialism and globalism in today's filter. Does talk about destiny in the middle of that book. I'd sure like to ask the indigenous peoples of the United States how they feel. Oh, look, the friars at San Juan Capistrano were serving Jell-O. Oh, I love Jell-O. Love San Juan Capistrano. Holy cow. I love to bake, but that poster kid is scary. I mean, he makes Chucky look well-adjusted. Ads in a textbook. How capitalist. I did look at the very back page where somebody had wrote notes from Professor R.R. Newman that treason is when a person speaks or does against the government or the country. Professor Newman, I profoundly disagree. It is our duty to speak against the government when necessary. Well, that was a brief history lesson from 100 years ago, a small perspective. You make your own decisions, and please go out and vote. I'm going to go back out and play catch. Thank you for joining us at Yeti at Large. Play ball!